$0.25 charge for each month of 30,000. Residency restrictions apply. Take delivery by 4/2. Jeep is a registered trademark of FCA US LLC.
Need to stock up on everyday essentials fast? Well, you're in luck. At Walmart.com, you can score everyday low prices on everything from pantry, household, and pet supplies to beauty and personal care must-haves. We'll even deliver your order for free in just 2 days. Yes, get free
Test 1, 2.
2-day shipping on your faves.
Good.
Tap on the banner to shop
Testing.
our best sellers now.
Testing 1, 2. Risa, Lee, Gibson sisters, Alex Hernandez, Mandy, and Sarah DeBoard. You guys lit up the feed this week, and so you were the names I called. If you guys need help on Twitter, these guys are always tweeting. They're awesome at it, so if you need help, find some of those people that raise their hand. And there's a lot of you on Instagram, too. I want to dive in, though, and talk about social media. Why is it so important at Fight CRC? The first one is just the obvious. Almost this whole room raised the hands to say you guys have social media. And as you know, social is just the way we are connecting these days. In our country, I think you probably heard from our global leaders yesterday, it's how we're connecting globally. So it's a really big deal, not only in our personal relationships, but it's also huge when it comes to advocacy in Congress. So the first thing I want to show you is just why advocate. This was really interesting. There was a survey in 2015, and they surveyed House and Senate communications directors and other legislative directors, and it was called Social Congress 2015, and that was the report. And here are 4 things that the report, and stood out to me as far as why advocate with social media. The first one is that senators, can you go to this slide? Perfect, okay. The first thing I think you guys need to know is that in this survey of people working on the Hill, they said that they're actually using it. And so sometimes I wonder, is this tweet going anywhere? Does anybody really see it? But the survey said that they are more inclined to use social media than they were in the past, senators and representatives. So good news, they are using it, they are seeing it. And the second point I thought was really interesting is that the survey, the communications directors indicated that social media is helping improve the relationships between our representatives and their constituents. One thing was interesting, 76% of the people who took that survey said they agree or strongly agree that social media enabled them to have more meaningful interactions with constituents. 70% of the people who took that survey said that that made their members more accountable to their constituents. So straight from their mouths, those are the people running their platforms, so it's very effective. I thought another interesting thing for you guys to know is they said that 30 or fewer similar comments on a social media post are enough to get an office's attention. So for example, when we send out an action alert outside of calling Congress, and we'll email you and we'll say, okay, hey, either send this email, or sometimes we'll say email and tweet this. If 30 or fewer of you start tweeting about colorectal cancer or research funding or appropriations or whatever that message is, survey will get their attention. And then the last thing I think is important for you to know is that they did indicate that if their member is undecided on something, it has been able to sway them based on what people are just posting on social media. One interesting thing in their survey, though, is that they said they do not feel that social media posts provide enough information to identify constituents. So what that means is that when it comes to your message on social, if you're going to ask your member to support something or do something for you, identify yourself and say, I live in your district. I'm a constituent. I live in this city or this town. All it takes is get on Twitter and you can see the nastygrams. It's awful these days. And so, I feel for our members of Congress because I look at their social media and they can't say anything without getting a lot of backlash, no matter what side of the aisle they're on. So I think that there's a lot of power not only in just the communication to the members, but your positive message of being very clear, here's what I want, here's what I ask, I'm gonna stick to the policy, and I can either vote for you or not vote for you. Make sure they know that you're in their district, and that will hold a lot of weight. Okay, so everybody bought in on why? Yeah? Nod your heads? Okay. I always like this to be interactive, but I'm gonna go fast. Okay, a few tips for Twitter. I'm just gonna do Twitter and Facebook today. I'm sorry, Instagram users. If you need Instagram tips, Instagram's really fun. Ivory and Ivory and Amanda are big Instagrammers. Who else in here is a big Instagrammer? May loves to be on my Instagram. Mike, my husband back here, Gibson sisters. Okay, if you guys need help on Instagram, Lee, Marilyn, Instagram's getting really fun, so I'm sorry, I'm not trying to leave it out, but find these people who use it a lot and ask for help. But this information, some of these tips are going to come from the George Washington University. They actually did a study, and then they on colorectal cancer social media. So a lot of this is coming from them as far as their research and what's been proven. A lot of these are just best practices in general. So a few tips: if you're going to tweet, keep them short. It's hard if you're long-winded or you write long. Twitter did us a big favor this year, and we've gone from 140 to 280 characters. You have a little bit more space, which is really nice. The name, the @name handle does not count as your character. It doesn't count in the 280 anymore, and the links also often don't count. So you can put a link in there. It won't count it, but still, shorter the better. I'm sure if you guys are scrolling through Twitter, if somebody has like this novel, a Twitter novel, you don't read it. So be mindful of that when you're tweeting. Add a picture or a video. Twitter government elections team said 62% on average boosts, adding a photo boosts retweets by 62% on average. So if you even see the Twitter feed happening for Call in Congress right now, if you guys are adding a picture to it, it's boosting engagement and retweets and things like that. Tweet at an author or an organizational handle when possible. So for example, just hypothetically, say you wanted to tweet about your day and you wanted to tag Fight CRC in your tweet and say you were having such a wonderful day. That's going to boost your reach because Fight CRC, hypothetically, is going to see your tweet and go, retweet, thank you for being at our event and spreading our message. So that's a helpful tip in your advocacy. I've heard sometimes that people will get on Twitter, and I hear this all the time, nobody sees my tweets. Like, anybody feel that way sometimes? Nobody sees them. Nobody follows me on Twitter. It doesn't matter. But if you really do want to develop a presence on Twitter, start tagging organizations tied to your message. Tag them with your story. If you guys are local in your area, you could always tag your local media and local reporters and say, here's my story. If you've shared your story on our blog, tweet out the link, tag your media in it. You never know if they'll pick it up. So there's some ways to boost your presence if you feel like nobody sees your tweets and nobody engages in it. Another tip for that point is promoting engaging. So it's kind of what you make it. I mean, I know that's a life lesson, but really it goes the same on social media. So if you log in, you engage with others, you like their stuff, you reply to them, they have a picture of them and their dog, and you say, cute dog on Twitter, it's amazing how far that can go. So be personable. It's amazing who you'll meet just by being encouraging. And Lord knows Twitter needs a little bit more encouragement these days. Another tip, be responsive. If somebody does reach out to you or say something, just say hi back. Twitter's very much like person to person. And then the last tip I'm going to give you on Twitter is edit before you post. Unlike Facebook, you can't go edit your tweet. And I think it's made more than one headline of tweets that needed to be edited or not posted at all before they went out. So sometimes you are not quick enough to delete your tweet as well because the screenshot feature can capture that. So anyway, you can't edit your tweets. Please really think about what you're tweeting. Check hashtags. If you get the hashtag wrong, it won't feed into the right place. Check handles. If you get the handle wrong, you have to redo it. So a few tips for Twitter. I'm going to hop over to Facebook now. Usually people are a little bit more familiar with Facebook. So my biggest plea on Facebook, again, is keep posts short. Or up to 60% more distribution. So Facebook will let you write as long as you could write all day on Facebook. They don't care. But your people care. So just be mindful. Shorter the better when it comes to what you're posting on Facebook. Add photos and videos. Same goes on Twitter. There's a study that said posts with photos receive up to 50 more likes than non-photo posts on Facebook. One thing I'll encourage you to do is test it. So I've kind of tested this on a few different pages I have, and sometimes posts with photos do better, and sometimes I think we're so inundated these days with posts with photos and graphics that sometimes actually a short sentence works better in a question. Use a conversational tone, especially on Facebook, and so if it sounds businessy and organizationally, people probably will skim over it. This is a lot to do with not only your advocacy, but your awareness on Twitter. So I'm starting to blend the lines a little bit. But I know a lot of you guys are big champions for awareness on your Facebook pages. So if you want to see more engagement, you don't want to see people kind of drown out, I would say keep it short, be conversational, write like you talk, and you might see a little bit more traction if you're trying to boost that. Ask questions, respond to increase engagement. So one thing I'm seeing on Facebook is people get kind of preachy on Facebook, but when you pause and ask a question, it helps. So for example, instead of posting, get screened, get screened, get screened, it could save your life, which is a fine post one day. Why don't the next one be like, have you been screened? Or, hey, all of my followers, is there anything that is stopping you from being screened? Or any ideas why people wouldn't? Or instead of, I'm on the Hill, join this, do this tomorrow on Virtual Advocacy Day, instead of saying, go sign this petition, you need to do this, you could instead say, will you support me tomorrow? Or who's with me? Something like that to open up, even that will engage your virtual advocates, because you guys are all gonna be helping us engage people when we're on the Hill tomorrow. The last thing I'm gonna tell you is hashtags may or may not help your tracking on Facebook. Facebook's gotten a little friendlier over the year when it comes to pages and trackers and feeds. They're now letting us feed in posts from our page and the groups more than they used to like a year or two ago, but hashtags are still iffy. So I'm not gonna encourage you not to use a hashtag, because if you put it, it can group your post in with, oh, sorry, I'm getting excited, guys. I love social media. If you add it, it might group your posts in with other posts like that, and it might expand your reach somewhat, but just so you guys know, on Twitter, we can go pull anybody who's tweeted with the hashtag of this conference, no problem, and it's all gonna feed in if you're public. Same on Instagram. If you guys add the hashtag, I can see a whole feed of what you've posted, as long as you don't protect your account. Facebook doesn't work like that. They don't like to play the same way. I'm gonna take a quick rabbit trail and address Strong Arm Selfie for this reason. First thing is I wanna thank you guys for all the Strong Arm Selfies. You are amazing. I told Angie that I pulled it before we came, and as of last August, because the ambassadors helped kick it off last August, we've had over 19,000 posts come in. And that counts as individual posts, that counts as shares, and that's just on Twitter and Instagram. So it's making a difference. I've never seen Strong Arm Selfie be this huge before. So a few tips. I do want to let you know we have a blog this year that's an FAQ, kind of a rundown of some of the ins and outs, because we get a lot of questions. A few things I want you guys to know is it is tracking Twitter and Instagram, so keep it up. Doing awesome. Retweets and shares of those do count. Facebook, I'm not going to discourage you from doing Facebook because it's raising awareness. So even if you're posting your Strong Arm Selfie pictures on Facebook, it's still getting out there. If you are trying to do a lot of Strong Arm Selfie posts on Facebook and you want them to count toward our $1, what I encourage you to do is put them a Facebook album and then let us know you're doing that, because then we can easily go into the album and say, okay, this album has, how many of you guys have in that? Like 5,000 or something? Yeah, you're being very humble. Yeah, oh, we have 5,000 pictures. It's amazing. These guys are the Strong Arm Selfie queens. They put all their pictures in a Facebook album, and so that's a quick way. When I pull what Instagram and Twitter has brought, then I go in and add 5,000 on Facebook, and that's $5,000 for Fight CRC. So Strong Arm Selfie, thank you guys so much for what you're doing on that. It's been amazing. We actually got grouped into a study this guy's doing. I can't remember where he's from. I think maybe Belgium. And he was doing the social media study the past 2 weeks during March, Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month. And he was trending hashtags for this cause to just evaluate how far the messages were going. And I found it really interesting because he was polling colorectal cancer, colon cancer, rectal cancer, and Strong Arm Selfie. And so because of what you guys have been doing, now Strong Arm Selfie is being grouped with the cause, and that's a big in part to you guys. So yeah, big applause for you guys. Okay, so the last thing I'm just gonna leave you with is a few resources if you want to know more. Obviously, if you're new to social media or you get stuck, you're not sure what to And so we Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, please share. We put out a lot of content for you guys. So that's a good starting place. This link, a lot of the tips I was referencing is from this Colorectal Cancer Social Media Toolkit by George Washington University. So that's worth a read. I think it was really helpful for me to see, and I think you guys would really enjoy it. And then the last thing I'm going to let you know, if you aren't sure of your members' Twitter handle, C-SPAN has a list of them. And so if you go to Twitter, go to C-SPAN, look at their lists, you'll be able to find them. Or a quick Google search, just type in your member's name plus Facebook or plus Twitter, and it'll bring it up really quickly. With that, where's Sheilene? She's going to tell you about something else happening. Go to Twitter, go to C-SPAN, look at their list, you'll be able to find them.
Hi, so yeah, we've got a lot of really great things going on social media on Danielle's, and we also have something kind of new. So recently we acquired a platform called Gather Voices. And as you know, we are spread out throughout the country. This is a great time for us to convene, but we don't really get an opportunity all the time to collect your voices in one place. And that amplifies our message. It can really sort of hit home from a personal level when people can see your face, hear your voice. And so what this app does is it allows you, it gives you a prompt. We load in talking points. We can load it around a specific ask. We can load it around, a specific event. And we give you talking points, and then it tells you how to frame yourself within the video. It tells you where to put your face. It tells you what lighting to use if you're, in too light an area. It tells you if it's too noisy to hear your voice. And it gives you the prompts as you're speaking. So, and it also tells you how long your video can be. So this app allows us to collect multiple videos around the same topic. So we can set a campaign, and then videos can come in from all over the country. We collect them on our YouTube page, and then we can either publish them individually or we can cut them together to make sort of a collective video. And that allows us, again, to put your voices and your faces where they can be front and center and heard the best. So if you were in our Facebook event for Call on Congress, you probably saw some Meet Your GAC videos that they were kind enough to do for us. They were our guinea pigs, and they did a fabulous job. And we used that platform to pull all of those videos together. So we don't have a specific campaign out right now, but we're going to be using this tool more and more. And so what we're going to ask you to do is to download the app. So it's called Gather Voices. It's for iOS, it's for Android and iPhone. So everybody can just pull out their phones right now and download this app. It's free. If you are not a smartphone person, Chad, yeah, that's Sheila's phone though. Like, come on. If you're not a smartphone person, you can access it via the web. So it's www.gathervoices.com. This is what our page looks like on Gather Voices. And if you register with them, whenever we put out a campaign, you'll get an email. If you have the app, you can enable push notifications, so it'll just pop up on your phone saying, hey, Fight CRC has put out a new campaign, and wherever you are, you can record a short video for us and have your voice be counted. So it's a really great tool. We're really excited to start using it for advocacy purposes. We might even pull it into different event purposes as we go forward. So we just want you to have that on your radar and on your phones so it can be used. But just to echo what Danielle said about Twitter and about social media, the power of social media, whenever I'm on the Hill, when I meet with a member or a staff member, if I post a strong arm selfie and I tweet it at them, 9 times out of 10, they will like it, they will retweet it. It's really, really fantastic how engaged members are on social media, so don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate it at all. So thank you guys very much, and I'm going to pull Angie up on stage for. Oh yeah, actually, I suppose we should. You know. Does anybody have any social media? Yes, Rissa.
It's not a question, but this morning on Good Morning America, Harry Connick Jr. and his wife Jill Goodacre were talking about their foundation cause, the New 50. So she had breast cancer, and he was talking about colorectal cancer and mentioned Cologuard and getting screened. So I immediately jumped on Twitter and thanked Good Morning America and the two of them for mentioning that, and I've already had like 4 retweets. So it's great to find those things, and then also,
Yeah.
I'm just watching TV.
Absolutely, go ahead.
So those are.
So
I missed what you had said, so I'm sorry if I
Risa,
duplicated that. But
we were highlighting your efforts on Twitter as a good example. That's perfect. So I want to piggyback. So did everybody hear Risa? Could you guys hear what she said? So I'm going to add to that. And she mentioned that Good Morning America covered this new campaign, a new cause, and she thanked the show. And I also want to share, so Exact Sciences does Cologuard, and this is their campaign. And one way that we acknowledge our sponsors is to thank them on social media, and we always make sure we do that. It's a big part of Elizabeth's role, is making sure we send out messages to thank them. And so that's another way you can engage with us. It reminds me of not only, follow them in their campaigns and like and support what they're doing, but then also, I've seen, what was it, a few years ago with Bayer. It really surprised me. We had a Facebook post probably 2 or 3 years ago when Bayer was our main 1 Million Strong sponsor, and we put something out one morning, thank you, Bayer, for helping support this campaign. We couldn't do it without your support. And it got liked and shared so much. And I was actually really surprised on Facebook. And it had this whole feed of comments from our advocates saying, thank you. Without this, we couldn't do it without you. And we were able to show Bayer and say, genuinely, thank you for all you're doing. And so that's another thing when you see our sponsor thank you posts, if you guys can share those, like them, share your story, that would be helpful.
Any other questions? You guys are social media pros now? Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You go ahead and stay here. So, all right. So we have one more thing as it relates to social media. We're going to talk about you. Whoa! Okay. So I recruited Danielle 5 years ago because we had our first 1 Million Strong campaign, and I needed models. So she was a 2-time colorectal cancer survivor. We had already partnered with the Colon Club, and so we had some nice colon clubbers who came down to do our first 1 Million Strong campaign, which was truly one of those crazy ideas that we came up with. And Carly Bauman, our president at the time, had said, well, Angie, if you can find the money, go ahead and do it. So we had $10,000 for 1 Million Strong. Michael over there trademarked it really quick for me. I didn't even know really how to do a trademark at that time. So we did the campaign. I met Danielle at that photo shoot. 6 months later, she started on board blogging for us. We had our first 1 Million Strong campaign in New York City, where we shut down Times Square. And we had a partner that said, hey, we want to give out 10,000 tattoos in the middle of Times Square. And they said, well, it seems like a not so effective idea. Why don't we shut down Times Square and really bring attention to colorectal cancer and have a colon and have dancing and really recruit people to pledge to be screened for colorectal cancer. That's about when Danielle came on board. I think she thought we were a little bit crazy. It took me a long time to recruit her to come on full staff with us. She was like, I'm not really sure I want to do this. I've got a pretty good gig right now. And I just persistently said, I don't think that's the right choice. I think the right choice is to be with us and to help us grow 1 Million Strong. And so when we did 1 Million Strong that year with Danielle, we had 1 million engagements, and we thought that was great. We thought that was amazing. We thought we'd knocked it out of the park. This year, we already are at, 145 million media impressions. And that was we're not even done with March. Since she's been with us, we've been on the Today Show, we've been in People Magazine, we've done multiple PSAs that have had, over 2 million each year in PSA donation time, where it's playing in local communities. We've grown the ambassador training program for many of the ambassadors in this room who rocked it out and got on their local news. Our communications team has been behind you guys, and Danielle has been leading our communications for the last 5 years. So I love Danielle, and I love her family, and May and Mike have been a part of the Fight CRC family for the last 5 years, and May's an advocate, Mike's an advocate, and it truly has been a family affair. So this is what I do know, is that she's staying on with us, and I'm sorry I'm emotional, I have so much respect for her. But she needs to put her manuscript for her life first. She needs to put May and Mike first, for sure. And so she's moving on into a different role in her life and staying on with us in a different way. But I want to honor her and what she's done and give her a decanter to drink lots of wine while she doesn't have anything to do. And Michael. Anyway, but you deserve a lot. This has been amazing. So, if you want to say anything, you can. Or you can not. Sure.
I wasn't ready for this. Some of you guys, a lot of you guys are new, so if I haven't met you, welcome. I was diagnosed when I was 17. A lot of you guys know that, some of you don't. And as you can imagine, this is always a lonely journey, but being a junior in high school and trying to figure this out was a lot. And when it came again at 25, it was still a lot. And so this is, I know a lot of you don't like journey, the word journey, but for me, I can't think of another way to describe it right now. This is a journey for me. And I felt so alone when I was a teenager, with the exception of that guy back there who's quiet and I can never look at him. But the process of growing up in this disease, I've lived 50% of my life with it, and now 50% of my life without it, because I just hit my 17-year mark. And thank you. It's been a unique experience, and even still as a teenage survivor of this, sometimes I still try and find my place. And so advocacy has been a way for me to make sense of all of this, and you guys truly are our family and my tribe. And I came in as a colon club model, so any other colon clubbers, I was in 09 with Trish, and that changed my life, and then it opened the door for me to meet these guys and Angie's and Michael and this team. You guys have helped me heal so much, and the advocate community, I don't know that I wouldn't be who I am without you guys. And so I hope you know this transition for me has been hard. It was the hardest few words to come out of my mouth when I told Angie I had to make a change, but I'm doing this, and I hope it helps some of you survivors in the room also relate, because there's phases to this disease. And man, I've been in the mode where I'm gonna fight it, and it's all I can think about, and it's my everyday, and it's been my physical battle. And then I've gotten into the phase where it's my emotional battle, and I'm going through the emotions, and then it's my mental and my spiritual battle, and it's a whole wave. And so if you guys are in that boat and you're survivors and you're just trying to figure this out, I just want to give you the freedom and permission to know that this is going to ebb and flow, and that's normal. I'm 17 years into this, and this year in this phase I just hit, I need to take a pause. I need to rest. My body needs to rest. I don't know about you guys, but this stuff wears me out. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to invest in this little girl right here, We'll be around. We're your family, but for you guys, you have always been there for me ever since I've stepped in, and I know you will be there for me as I step in and out. So big thanks to Angie. She's changed my life, and she will change the world. I have no doubt. So.
Thank you. And she is amazing and will continue to be amazing. So next, I mean, it's almost a hard transition, but we are transitioning. And we do have a member of Congress that is coming, and Eric Hausman will be sharing his story with us as well. But before we do that, we have some time. We're actually ahead of time, which is wonderful. And one of our national spokespersons, Scott Lagasse, is here. He's a NASCAR driver. He's here from Florida. He's going to be joining us on the Hill. I have asked him to come just very briefly share a little bit about his journey with Fight Seriously. And he's been so gracious to kind of on the spot come up here and talk to us. Thank you.
Where'd she go? Danielle. That's hard to follow. Thanks. Once again, putting me on the spot and then making it very difficult. Yeah, I turn left and now I'm learning to turn right occasionally, so this is a whole different thing. In all honesty, I get asked from time to time to do things and to be a part of things. And the group around me has done a very good job in the past of vetting things very hard to see if it makes sense. So when this came up, it was very emotional, obviously, and I'll tell you my story personally in a minute, and I'll keep it short, Angie, because I could talk a lot. But one of the things to kind of follow that was you look at who's involved. And I have become very close with Angie. Danielle is my homie, as we call each other back and forth, but gonna miss chit-chat. Well, we'll still chit-chat a lot, but you are a lot of reasons why I decided to spend as much energy at this as I can, and keep up the fight. You are an inspiration. So my story is a little bit different. There's survivors in the room, and everybody goes through it. But I was 33 years old. This was 3 years ago. I'm getting old. 33 years old, healthy as can be, training, doing 2-a-days, whether it be bicycle, running, swimming, and actually training for a triathlon. So healthy as I could be, ate well, no family history that I knew of at the time, and life's good. Wife's 6 months pregnant, building a house together. We were just married the year before, so really life couldn't get any better than that. And started to notice some issues, really more so just a tenseness. I am not the typical person to go to a doctor. I am very headstrong and stubborn, and but fortunately have very good people around me. So I sent my personal doctor a text, and he said, "You need to go get that looked at." So he finally convinced me to go see a GI. At the end of the day, it was colon cancer. In my case, extremely fortunate because it was stage 1, 1 millimeter to the wall, so as lucky as you could get. And I've asked multiple times on what ifs, but they won't tell you that. So mine, again, was very, very simple and easy to deal with. And so I did the surgery, knock on wood, or thankfully have not had to do chemo or radiation yet. The question I get all the time now is, how often do you get follow-ups? And my answer back to that is very simple. I can't make it a year before I mentally don't need a follow-up to know that I'm good. So really fortunate to be here. Again, this group, I heard family come up, and Angie, Danielle, you guys have become that. So the trips to see how hard you guys work and how frugal you are in regards to your own travel was.
He's making fun of us because we share a room.
No, honestly, it's completely opposite of that. So I've been around a lot of different things over the years, and again, you get asked to do a lot of things, and you see a lot of waste. In the first event I went to, they said, come meet us at our place. So I did, and it was a small VRBO that they were all crammed into. And at that point, they very well could have all been in their own individual hotel rooms very expensively. And for me, that meant a ton. That set me down the path to say, I'm in. So not a jab, but an honor to be a part. So thank you. I'll let it get on to the next stage. Heard cancer and knew all that I was
really quick.
dependent
I know it's
on
a
me
very
as
short PSA,
a
but I
person.
think
That was scary. My wife was 6 months pregnant. No parent should have to bury their kid. Are they going to be okay without me? I have employees and families that depend on me. A lot of stress that then came from that of wondering how things were going to be without me. I kept my diagnosis quiet for the simple fact of I didn't want to bother anyone with it. I didn't want to stress my family, my parents, until I knew the answers and specifics. It was quiet to the point that I didn't tell my mom until I was going for surgery. Don't do that. That was a big mistake. I feel very fortunate that surgery was the answer for me. I see a lot of people go through a whole lot worse than I had to, but I was lucky I caught it. I'd encourage survivors to speak up. I never knew colorectal cancer existed, and you never know who could be listening to your story, and you could save a life by doing so. I'm a huge believer in teamwork, and Fight CRC and 1 Million Strong is a great team, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
so. That particular PSA had over $2 million of donated time when we released that. It played on CNN Airport Network, Fox News affiliates around the country. And I have to say, Scott is so dedicated to this cause and has been wonderful to us as far as flying when we need him, coming to events, helping us raise money. And that really is a reflection of our national spokespersons, is their commitment is authentic. And they are fighting alongside all of us. So really applaud Scott for his commitment to the cause, for sure. So next, where is Eric? There's Eric. Eric is next. Eric has been a longtime advocate for Fight Colorectal Cancer. He came with his wife, Rose. They've chaired the Grassroots Action Committee for many years. They've mentored. Eric continues to come back and help us. He is a rock for sure for our team, helping guide us, helping encourage us. He raises money for research. He raises money to help support our scholarship program. And so Eric is just a wonderful advocate and friend of the organization, and he's going to share his story with us.
I'm not going to share my story, okay? I was told to talk about the power of advocacy, and that's what I'm going to do. If you want to know my story, I'll see you out there. I'm better off telling you out there, not up here, because I probably won't get a word out edgewise. Okay, welcome. My name is Eric Hausman. I'm an advocate, and I'm here today to talk about the power of advocacy. All of you are here because you're advocates. And if you don't already know the power of advocacy, you will by 6 o'clock on Tuesday evening. Now, I wrote this the other day, so I'm going to be looking up and down on it. but it's funny because my first line here is, you can open up a newspaper on any given day. And then after watching that social media right there, I was like, well, who really opens up a newspaper besides me? I mean, I do, but. So let's kind of relate it to not just a newspaper, any social media, because advocacy comes in many forms, especially with social media. But I'm gonna read newspaper, but you guys can all think like social media, okay? Twitter, whatever. So on any given day, you can open up a newspaper and find someone, somewhere, or something advocating for something. A while back, the residents of South Dakota were advocating against the Keystone Pipeline. The lobbyists here in DC working for the pipeline were advocating on how much they needed the pipeline or how much they cared about the citizens or the environment. Now I come to realize essentially we are lobbyists, okay? I've always believed the word lobbyist to be a dirty word, okay? Because, and I'm gonna say okay a lot apparently because it just keeps coming out all the time. But I've always associated with large corporations spending tons of money to influence government officials for their own benefit. But here's the definition of lobbying. It's a form of advocacy with the intention of influencing decisions made by the government, carried out by individuals, or more commonly by lobbyist groups. We are a lobbyist group, but we advocate. Now here's the definition of advocacy. For public support for, the backing of, the promotion of, the championing, or the arguing or pushing for a cause. Now here's what separates us from the dirty word of lobbying. And it's only dirty because I think it's dirty. We're not getting paid to be here. We're much more passionate about our cause, or directly affected by our cause. And finally, we're taking our cause back home to the public with the interest of saving lives. That's different than what a lobbyist does. It's not emotional. I don't know why I'm emotional. So I've been coming down here for about 9 years. And prior to that, I realized that I've been an advocate most of my adult life. When I was in the Navy, I was an enlisted officer, and I advocated for the better treatment of my subordinates. I became the president of the Stagehands Union, the president of my kids' Pop Warner football organization, and now the president of my firemen's union. The reason I did this is because I felt, sorry. I know. I felt I had a better voice. I felt I had a better voice, or should I say a louder voice. Many people will not speak up because they can't or they just won't, and that's okay, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to speak for all. So as you can see, advocacy can wear many faces. Some of you may now realize through your life that you've been an advocate in the past as well. But what I like most about what we do here this week is that our mission and our goal is not just for us or our small group here today. We're here for the people of our communities, our states, and our country, and the world as well. And I say world because I believe that the rest of the world follows what the path that the U.S. sets. On Tuesday, we'll go to the halls of Congress to meet with the men and women, to meet with the men and women who have the ability to change the pace of research for this shitty disease with just a stroke of a pen. It's our job to get that pen in motion. By the way, I read this thing about 30 times and didn't cry one time. All right. It's our job to get that pen in motion. It's our job to educate them by telling them our stories and to represent the families that are, that will be, and that have been affected by this disease. And it's our job to continue with that life-saving advocacy back home. Now, when someone calls you and says, hey, last year, I went to go get a colonoscopy and I wasn't covered, and this year I am. Thank you. When someone calls you and says, I just had a colonoscopy and I had a precancerous polyp removed. Thank you for saving my life. When you leave the halls of Congress and you get a text message that the congressman you just saw, who was not even in your district, that you asked to sign a bill, had just signed on, that's when you realize the power of advocacy. So on Wednesday, we could take our message back home. by educating our doctors, by contacting our friends and local organizations, and by holding fundraisers, because we must continue to advocate by raising awareness and spreading the word about the importance of screening and research. Thank you all for your time. Want me to do it? You got it? Thanks.
Thank you, Eric. So next, I have the pleasure of bringing on Congressman Jamie Raskin, who is the newest addition to our congressional committee. Congressman Raskin served in the Maryland State Senate for many years. He is a constitutional law scholar and an author of several best-selling books. He represents Maryland's 8th District. And in addition to that, he is a survivor. So please welcome to the stage Congressman Jamie Raskin.
So good morning, everybody. Really delighted to be with you. I represent Maryland's 8th Congressional District, which borders D.C. It's Montgomery County, Frederick, and Carroll County. Is there anybody here who's from my district? Yes, there's somebody. Where are you from? Very nice. Well, welcome. Everybody else has flown in from around the country, as I understand it. Is that right? That's great. Howard County. Oh, very nice. All right. We got Marylanders in the house. I'm psyched to be with everybody here. I've been asked to talk a little bit about what I went through, and I'm happy to do that, and then to talk about lobbying. How many people have actually gone to lobby their members before? Okay, so and how many people, but this would be their first time doing it? So maybe, seems like 2/3 of the people have been here before. So that's good. Well, I was diagnosed with stage 3 colon cancer in 2010, and I wasn't in Congress. I was still teaching law school at American University, where I teach. And I was a state senator at the time, and I had gone in because I was actually having reflux symptoms, so they said, we'll do an endoscopy, but they said, we'll go ahead and do a colonoscopy while we're at it. And then I woke up, and I was surrounded by all of these nurses who were hugging me, which I thought was really strange. And I said, what's going on? What happened? And they said, well, you got to talk to the doctor. And at that point, I was off to the races. So I ended up doing it all. I did radiation. I did surgery twice. I did chemo. Any of you guys do chemo? FU, what's it called? FU 40? It's the most aptly named medicine they ever made. FU 45 or whatever it is, and I still, when I drive by the hospital where I had that particular set of chemo, I still gag, and I immediately try to get off on the exit. It was a learning experience. It's a learning experience, as you know. I felt from the beginning that I'd gone off to a foreign land, even though I never left home, but I was in a very different place. I found an essay by Susan Sontag who said that everybody is born with 2 passports, and one is to the land of the healthy and living, and the other is to the land of the sick and the dying. And I really felt when I finished my last chemo that, and I said to the doctor, what do I do now? And he just said, well, you go home and you can go on with your life. And I just broke down because of a very emotional thing, and I felt I had come back from this journey, but I resolved and vowed at that point that I would never, ever forget my brothers and sisters who are going through this every single day. And because you know, it's too easy to think that it's all right, but every day there are millions of people who are suffering with colon cancer or stomach cancer or lung cancer or cystic fibrosis or narcissistic personality disorder. You know, people have their struggles, you know, and we've got to remember everybody's going through something. So when I was going through it, I continued working luckily I had enough energy that I was able to continue working. But one of the things that kept me going was that in the Maryland Senate, I was the floor leader for marriage equality, which we were doing back in 2012. And Maryland became the first state in the union to pass marriage equality without being told we had to do so by our state Supreme Court. And we also became the first state where the voters upheld it at the polls because it was petitioned to the ballot, and we became the first state in the country ever to ratify marriage equality at the polls, although in fairness, that's only because the polls closed 1 hour earlier in Maryland than they did in Maine, where the same thing happened. But we were part of a wave of people really saying that this had gone on enough. But you know, when you're a floor leader on a bill, when it's all over, you get to make a little speech. And I had been wearing my chemo belt because I would go to Anne Arundel Medical Center, I'd get my chemo done, and then I would come back into session, and the president had kindly allowed us to organize the sessions around my getting back from the chemo, and I would wear my belt. And the guy who sat next to me, Jim Brochin, who's a state senator from Baltimore County, used to say that I was wearing my chemo belt just to get sympathy in the marriage equality vote from the other senators, which I guess was kind of true. But anyway, so we went through the whole thing, and then we finally passed it. And you know, when it was over, I got to make a little speech because I was the floor leader, and I got to say something. And I got up and I said that that I had learned something very profound, both going through, you know, my medical struggle at the same time that I was going through this legislative struggle. And I said that I had learned the difference in life between misfortune and injustice, because if everything's going great in your life and you've got, you know, a family you love, a wife you love, constituents you love, 2 jobs you love, and a doctor tells you you've got stage 3 colon cancer, it's a misfortune because it can happen to anybody, and it happens to people every single day. And you know, you can't really blame anybody for it, I suppose. But if you come up with a diagnosis, a serious diagnosis like cancer or something else, and you can't get medical insurance because you love the wrong person, or you're married to the wrong person, or you lost your job, that's not a misfortune, that's an injustice, because we can do something about that. And you know, the life is hard enough with all of the illness and the sickness and the disease and the accidents and heartbreak and so on, that government should not be in the business of compounding misfortune with injustice. You know, that's not what government should be doing. We should be trying to alleviate misfortune and help people as much as possible. That's why I'm so glad that you guys have come here to testify before your elected representatives, the people who are your servants in Washington, that we need to remove the obstacles to colorectal screening. We need full funding in the NIH budget for cancer research, and we need the DoD peer review test as well. So tell them that we want a meaningful investment in dealing with this and all of the killer diseases in America. It's not a competition between breast cancer and colon cancer. We're all on the same side. All of our families are touched by this plague on the land. Now, in case you haven't guessed, I do have a political party. I am a Democrat, so forgive me if anything sounds too partisan. But I do just want to say that one thing that I've come to recognize being in government is that it seems like we've always got enough money for things we don't need. You know? Like nobody woke up and said, you know, we really need to go and invade Iraq and spend $1 trillion that we're going to be spending the rest of our lives paying off. But the money was there for it, you know? But if you need money for colon cancer research or breast cancer research, that's when people say, well, we just don't have enough money for it. We are the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We have enough money to solve the killer diseases and to treat our people. We do, and we've got to remember that. So, all right, well, I thought I was being interviewed, actually, so I hadn't really prepared anything to say. Was somebody going to ask me questions, or are we going to just do a little Q&A? Okay, I'm happy to answer your guys' questions. Thank you for coming here and what you're doing, and I'm happy to, you know, answer whatever's on your mind. Yeah.
You don't have to answer, but I was wondering how old you were when you were diagnosed.
Oh, well, let's see. Good question. I was 48. Yeah. 47 or 48, I think, yeah.
So can you talk to us a little bit about what, I'm over here, I'm
There
short,
you are.
I realize
Yeah.
that. So I'll stand, I guess, so everyone can see me. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you and your fellow representatives do as in support of specific causes, diseases? You're in a group, but what does that group do? How can we affect the small group then that supports colorectal cancer, screening, prevention, all of the bills that come to the, I guess it goes to
The Appropriations
Committee,
yeah.
and then, like, what is that process like, and
That's a
how can
great
we help to
question.
support you?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. During the appropriations process, all the members are writing letters and getting together in groups to write letters to say to the appropriators, the people on the Appropriations Committee, I feel very strongly about X, Y, or Z. So, of course, I'm always on the letters about cancer research for two reasons. One is I've been through this, and so I've been to that foreign land. Two is I'm the congressman from NIH. Okay, I represent Bethesda and Rockville. You're simply not going to find anybody more passionate than me about this. When I first got into Congress, there was a budget proposal to slash the NIH budget by $6 billion. $6 billion, and I got up and I railed about how, you know, and he's doing the research to solve our biggest medical problems. He's making tremendous progress on multiple sclerosis and cystic fibrosis and leukemia and, you know, bipolar disorder and so on. And we organized across party lines, across state lines, and so on. And we came back with a $2 billion increase my very first year. And I said, you know, let that be a lesson to them. You tried to cut the NIH budget. We're going to come back to try to double the NIH budget because, you know, nothing could be more important to our people than making sure that our sick family members are getting every possible advantage in the fight against cancer and so on. So what you need to do is go to your member who may not be an appropriator, who might not have a personal connection, say, to colon cancer, and say, you've got constituents for whom this is the most important thing, and we want you on those letters to the appropriators, and we want you fighting for money there. That is, you know, more important to us than tens of billions of dollars, more money to the Pentagon than they even asked for. I mean, some agencies get more money than they even asked for. They don't even know what to do with it, you know, and that's not the situation with NIH. And by the way, all the money doesn't stay at NIH. It goes, of course, to research teams and medical labs and universities across the country. So, you know, everybody's districts, or a lot of districts, are going to be affected by this. Yes?
Thank you so much, Representative Brass. Your last comment, I wanted to give a special thanks because as a researcher, I know what it's like to shut down a lab because there's insufficient funds. I also know what it's like to be on these study sections, reviewing these grants. So many great grants out there for cancer research, and we know that a lot of them are not going to get funded. But the question that I have for you is, For many years, we've been trying to get this Medicaid fix pushed through. It's a very simple thing. I come from Mississippi, which is not necessarily known as a progressive state. All 6 of our delegates have signed this year after year after year, but the trick is it never gets out of committee. What can we do to help get this Medicaid fix out of committee? Because it's really easy to get people to sign on for this.
Yeah.
But how do we get it moved?
Well, and in the way that Congress works, that's going to come down to the chair of the committee, who's got the option of either bringing it forward for a vote and sending it to the floor or sticking it in the drawer. But in the real world politics of it, the Speaker of the House and the majority party are going to have a lot of influence in terms of what the chair does. So, you know, you want to look for the chair of the committee or the subcommittee to get it moving. And I don't know if any of you guys are from Illinois, from Speaker Ryan's district, but from Wisconsin. Is anybody from Speaker Ryan's district in Wisconsin? Okay, so that's a powerful lobbying unit over there if you can go and talk to him. And he's got a very aggressive challenge in this race. And so I think his staff would be interested in hearing from you. But basically, the leadership of the House needs to hear, both everybody's member needs to hear and the leadership needs to hear that this is a real agenda out in the country. And there are millions of people who are looking to them for their leadership. Yes.
This is my first time here. And I've contacted, I'm from Texas, so we know how receptive Texas is to a lot of issues, at least in my district.
Yeah.
And I've sent letters, I've called. Can you give me advice as to when we're back home, what is the best way for us to get a real response and not a stock email basically saying so-and-so's a disaster, where you actually feel like they're actually hearing what you're saying and not just towing the party?
Yeah. Well, but I don't know who your representative is. I don't know if it's Lamar Smith.
It's Roger Williams.
Roger Williams. But I mean, so I don't know if Lamar Smith is any constituents here. Lamar, who's a good guy, is chair of the House Committee on Science and Technology. And he's somebody who should be susceptible to aggressive lobbying by constituents saying, we believe in science.
Is there a better way than the letters and the phone calls?
You
Should
know,
we go to local offices?
Yeah, I would try it all. I mean, because you don't know what is going to pierce the sound barrier with any particular member. You know, so I would try the calls, I would try the emails, I would try to sit down and, you know, unless they're really divorced from what's going on in their districts, and admittedly that happens in some cases, but unless they're really separate and apart, you should be able to find somebody who knows the member or knows someone on their staff, and then just say, sit down, we'd like to bring a group in here to talk about this. Because, you know, yeah. Yeah.
You just want to feel like you're being heard, and as a stage 4 patient, thank you for calling.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, you make a really good point. I mean, you know, I think you've got to embarrass, I'm not speaking about any specific member, but you've got to embarrass anybody who, you know, you write them a letter about cancer funding and they send you something back about a baseball stadium or something like that. You know, you've got to call them up and say, there's a very serious problem in your office. I mean, and I'm not even demanding a response anymore, but you should know this is embarrassing to me as a constituent that the office, you know, I'm not asking necessarily for a personal call from the member, although that would be nice, but you should at least be able to get the subject matters right in the stock letters you're sending out. I mean, in my office, people lose their jobs over stuff like that. And I'm a nice guy, but I mean, that's ridiculous, you know. So, I mean, yes.
Hi, Congressman.
Hi.
I'm a stage 4 cancer patient in Virginia. I'll get to my question in a second, but first of all, I'm a lesbian, and in 2014, I had to go to Maryland to get my marriage license because it was not recognized in my state.
Well, you know, that's funny you say it. First of all, thank you for coming to get married in Maryland. I said we were going to put the Mary back in
You
Maryland.
absolutely did.
And,
So
and
personally,
I also,
thank you very much.
I teased my friends in Virginia. I said, Virginia's for lovers, just not for all of them yet.
We're getting there, but
yeah,
thank
yes,
you.
it
That
did,
you what you did personally made a difference in my life. So
I love to hear it. Thank you much.
And then my question is, tomorrow when we're on the Hill and we're meeting with staffers, if we can't get in front of Congress people, what tips do you have for us?
Make your best case. Assume that they're like thinking rational people. Like make the best case, but emphasize to them how important it is to you and your families and other people and the people who are watching. And you don't regard this as a matter of partisan politics. I mean, you walk into a chemo ward, and you're going to find Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Greens. I mean, it affects like all of our people, and I'm disturbed to hear some of these stories because, for me, it is a cardinal principle that in a democracy, the highest office there is the office of citizen. And those of us who aspire and attain to public office are nothing but the servants of the people. And the minute that somebody starts, evincing an arrogant, elitist attitude, like that they're too busy to hear from their constituents, it's time for them to find new work. That's the way I think about it. So, yeah.
And my 22-year-old son got diagnosed with colorectal cancer. 2016, and he was 22, and stuff didn't go the way it should have progressed, and he passed away at 23 at the end of 2016. He was getting ready to start his master's in public health because he wanted to help people. So, here's where my question comes in, because I've been an advocate in the under 50 population and been screaming and yelling about this because my friend, when she got diagnosed, was 42. All she heard was, you're too young, you're too young, you're too young. She had 4 boys, I had 4 boys, which is why I picked up her fight after she passed away. And now I even continue it more for all the more younger people that this is occurring in. So the unfairness in the inequality of access to medical care, something has to happen. You had acid reflux, okay? Your doctor did an endoscopy. My son had acid reflux. They threw him on Prilosec, so they let his symptoms go. And I'm a medical technologist. I had to keep pressing them and asking them to do more tests until we got it to where we found out that he had the colorectal cancer. So and there's so many people in here under the age of 50 in their 30s and 40s that heard for months, you're too young, you're too young, you're too young. And it's not fair that somebody's survival is dependent on the dedication of the medical team that they end up with. And something has to change. I mean, I don't know what, but something has to change.
Thank you very much for the statement. Terribly sorry for your loss. I salute you in picking up the cause after your friend had colorectal cancer, even before your son came down with it. And thank you for sticking with it. A young man who lived 2 doors away from me, the year after I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer. He was 24. So at a certain point, you start hearing so much, oh, you're too young, this doesn't happen to people your age. You hear it all over the place. Something's changing. Something is going on. So we may need to develop new prevention and detection protocols to deal with the crisis in land. I don't know. And you're right. I mean, there's a lot of randomness and arbitrariness in who says what to whom, and I'm just hoping that we put the money into medical research so we can develop some systematic ways of dealing with it. I should mention as a footnote, I'm a vegan now. I don't touch red meat, but that's, so. Yes, hi.
I want to say thank you from the great state of Maryland that you represent. I'm very lucky to have Dutch Ruppersberger as my representative
Very
as
nice,
well.
yeah.
And I've been involved in somewhat local politics for a while, so I know Senator Jimbroshin as well. I just want to thank you for marriage equality. I benefited from that as well.
Oh, great.
My question to you is, we know we're in a very hostile environment, to say the least, in Washington, D.C., and some of us have representatives here who are perhaps on a different side of the aisle and are a hard no every time you go in. They do not believe that medical funding is the way. They believe in more private funding. How do you suggest in this hostile environment that we as advocates address them? And as a footnote to that, I would like to hear your plans for a presidential bid in maybe 2020.
Everybody's a comedian these days. First of all, thank you for coming from Maryland to lobby our people. I'll tell Dutch that I saw you. You know, I would not assume that you're here to lobby on something that is going to be politically controversial in the way that marriage equality was. I would come with the assumption that the people really will hear you, because it does cut across party lines. I remember, marriage equality was very tough for a long time. I remember when the very first Republican in the state Senate told me he was going to support marriage equality. We were in a group of senators. We had called on the more moderate Republicans, and we were talking about it. And finally, one of them says, well, I just realized it's not gay marriage that I've got a problem with. It's gay sex that I don't like. And then the other senator says, well, if you don't like gay sex, you should definitely be for gay marriage, because everybody knows there's no sex after marriage. So we actually got a vote. That was the very first time we crossed party lines on. The issue that you're here for is not like that. In other words, I don't think people are going to start with a partisan attitude about it. It will come down to the question that you raise of just government funding. Like, is it the role of government to be doing this? But, to take them back to what the Constitution says. The purpose of our government is to promote the general welfare and the common good. And what could be more important than uplifting the health and the safety of the people? That's what it's all about. We spend hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars on defense. We've got military bases in more than 100 countries around the world. We've got military all over the world. But any American citizen, and certainly one in this room, is far more likely to die from colorectal cancer than he or she is from an attack by Al-Qaeda or ISIS now. So this right now is the public health threat that's terrorizing our people. And I come back to the way I started. You guys have to communicate to people the sense of urgency and importance that this has in all of our families and the people who've been through it. We understand it, and there are tens of millions of families who've been touched by it, and it goes to our ability to survive and to live. I'm sending all of my strength and love to all of you guys out there who are suffering from cancer at whatever stage you're in. So hang tough. Hang tough.
Thank you, Congressman Rask. And I have to say, as a personal note, my first foray into advocacy was at a healthcare rally in Bowie, Maryland. And that's where I met Congressman Rask, and I was holding a sign that said diagnosed at 26 with stage 4 colorectal cancer. And so if it weren't for you, I don't know if I'd actually be here with a career in advocacy. So thank you. Thank you. And it's such a tremendous thing to have a survivor on our congressional committee who really understands what it's like to sit in our seats. So we're going to dive right into all of our policy asks. We're going to get you really ready for your Hill Day. So I'm going to ask Molly and Chelsey to join me on stage. You will remember them from yesterday, from your elevator pitch sessions. And I am going to do a little bit of a formal intro of these guys because I don't know if you noticed, but they really know their stuff. So Molly has been on the Hill for 5.5 years. Molly was the senior health policy advisor in Representative Leonard Lance's office. Leonard Lance has been on our congressional committee since its inception, I believe. And she, I have to tell you, walking around the Hill with Molly knows everybody. Molly is, every disease group comes to Molly and hugs Molly. So that's how you know Molly's good people. And then Chelsey spent 10 years on the Hill. And Chelsey is really, her focus was in appropriations. She is the money lady. So, and since she's come to Winning Strategies Washington, she has a focus in healthcare and pharmaceuticals. So again, really knows what she's talking about. So we're gonna dive right in first with appropriations. It is appropriations season here in Washington. And as you may have heard yesterday, we are still trying to figure out fiscal year 18, but our asks are gonna focus on fiscal year 19. So with that, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Thank you so much. It seems very unfair that I have to follow the congressman who was so inspiring. So if you guys will just pretend that he's still up here and how amazing, he was, that'd be great. It's really great to be with you again. Your enthusiasm and your drive and your passion are just so inspiring, and so thank you for doing this. It makes the difference. I spent 10 years on the Hill, and I have to tell you that this is one of my favorite parts of the job, is to see advocates who are passionate, who have a personal investment. So just thrilled to be here. Do I have to do the clicker? Okay, well, there's a lot of buttons, so we'll just see what happens. So one of our priorities as your lobbyists for Fight CRC is to make sure that anytime we ask you to do something, to weigh in with your member of Congress or whatever it may be, that we've explained why we're asking you to do it and why it's significant. We know that you have a whole full-time life that's not this, and so we want to make sure that we're using your time wisely and that you understand what we're asking you to do and why it's important. And so that's really my goal here today, is to make sure that you have that information. So I'm just gonna push a button and see what happens. Nope, that wasn't it. Let's try this one. Okay, there we go. So one of the kind of fundamentals to understand about what we're asking you to do is the difference between authorization and appropriation. There are two kinds of federal legislation. There's the authorization bills and there are appropriations bills. The authorization bills really give the federal agencies and programs to spend money. They can put limits on what they can use the money for. They specify up to how much can be spent, and in some cases what the time period is that it has to be spent in. So, for example, the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, that we have referred to before, includes some of the programs that we talked about yesterday. There's a lot of acronyms, so forgive me, but it includes the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program and the Peer-Reviewed Cancer Research Program. So the NDAA determines how much money can be spent and how it can be spent. So the annual appropriations bills actually write the check. They provide the funding. The authorization bill says you can spend the money. The appropriations bill says here's the money. So one of the issues that we try to follow is the appropriations process might provide less funding than was authorized. It might add restrictions. It might not provide any funding, even though it was authorized. So one of our main focuses is making sure that we follow through the process, not just the authorization process, but make sure that our priorities actually get funded. So with that background, let's jump into our specific priorities. And I don't want your eyes to glaze over because there's a lot of acronyms and numbers. Just know that we've chosen these programs specifically because they have the biggest impact on what we're trying to accomplish for the Fight CRC community. So we discussed this a little bit yesterday, the NIH and NCI funding And really, this is the front line of research. It's where the most basic research starts. And most of the treatments that we see today started with some kind of NIH-funded research. So it takes time. You know, it takes time to get these ideas from the bench all the way through and turn them into actual cures or treatments. So this is an investment that we can't just make one time. It's an investment that has to be sustained over time. And NIH, along with a lot of the federal budget, because of the constraints that we're under, has suffered in recent years. But with the way that things have played out, we've got a little bit of a boost on domestic spending for this fiscal year and for fiscal year 19. And so we expect that NIH will be one of those programs that benefits. And so we should know, you know, in the next couple of days how the current fiscal year fares, but your timing is great to go in and say, hey, let's make this a priority for fiscal year 19. So the next program I wanted to talk about is funded out of the CDC. That's the Center for Disease Control. And this is a grant program to implement evidence-based strategies in states. So, for example, in underserved communities or in other places that have barriers to getting this kind of screening and treatment. So just by way of comparison, in 2015, 31 grants were awarded out of this program. And so they've been awarded to places like state health departments and other organizations of that nature to implement screening for communities that may not otherwise have access to it. So this was one of the programs that we really have followed closely because it has been at risk. When the president proposed his ideas for the upcoming budget, he proposed consolidating this program into just a general cancer program and eliminated funding for it. So that was where we activated some of our advocates, and Congressman Raskin and others stepped up and weighed in and said, no, this isn't something that can be lumped in with something else. It's important. This is how it affects our community. And so we're really hopeful that in the FY19 budget, which will be later this summer, that this funding is protected. So we'll keep a close eye on that and make sure. Yeah. Say the question again.
Why aren't we, if 18 in 2018 and 70 million, why aren't we asking for 75 or 80?
Molly can answer you.
Yeah, so we have actually received less than 70. So if you see the FY17 enacted was 43. So we are asking for an increase of what was enacted in FY17. So we don't know what FY18 has yet, but we want just to continue. We want to get more than 43. And so this was something that we worked with other groups in the cancer community to come to an agreement on. So we worked very closely with One Voice Against Cancer, and that's a group of all different cancer advocacy groups, so that all of the different groups are coming to the Hill asking for the same number. Yep.
And I should note that 18 number is our hoped for number, and in the next couple of days we'll know if we accomplish that. Thank you. So this program allows, sorry, I lost my train of thought, but that was that was a very good question. I appreciate it. And we'll take questions at the end as well. So the other program that we've talked about a little bit, and I know it seems a little strange that it's at the Department of Defense, but it is. DoD has really stepped up its efforts to do research on diseases that affect members of the military, essentially. And so there is a program that allows cancer research on 11 different kinds of cancer, and colorectal cancer is one of those. And so the focus really is, you know, what are the risk factors that are specific to the military? But the good news is those risk factors are pretty universal, right? So this is a program that NIH is a little bit more conservative in their approach to funding research. This program really is where the really innovative stuff can happen. This is where you can take an idea that might be a little too far out there for the CDC or for NIH and come here and really have high risk, high reward kind of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that this program can fund, and I'll just give you a few of them. But it's cancer prevention, screening, early detection, diagnosis, treatment, and survivorship. So these are issues that obviously are of interest to the military because of the way that they impact the members of the military, but they're clearly of interest to the rest of the colorectal cancer population as well. So from 2009 to 2015, this program has funded over $14 million in colorectal cancer specific research. And again, this was another program that we had to really fight for on the authorization side. So there was an attempt to severely restrict the way that funds could be used. And that was something, again, thanks to the advocacy of folks in this room and others in the cancer community, we were able to get that harmful provision stripped out of the NDAA, that defense authorization bill that would have put those restrictions on it. So I think really it's, when you go to the Hill, there's a lot of acronyms, but the staff that you're going to be talking to speaks that language. They'll know what you're talking about. So I think we'll take questions at the end, but in the meantime, I'll turn it over to Molly.
And I'll just make one comment sort of anticipating a similar question to the last one. So as you can see, we've asked for, and $60 million was enacted in FY17, and then we are continue to ask for that same number. I think it's fair to look at $60 million as a floor. So you'll see in materials that's similar to how we've looked at NIH as well. So we want an increase of at least $2 billion. We want at least $60 million. And so I think that's a good way to frame it in your meetings. So I am going to talk a little bit about the Affordable Care Act. So this should probably have been called a shallow dive rather than a deep dive, because we could probably spend all of the 2 days that we have here talking about the ACA. It's a big, complicated bill. There's been a lot that's happened over the past year regarding the ACA. But so what I'm going to focus on today is just some of the most important patient protections that are included in the ACA and why they're so important. And that's sort of how we have looked at the various proposals to change the ACA that have come about. So, if they don't include those important patient protections that are important to us, then we can't be supportive of the legislation. And again, just to sort of fine point on it, so this is not included in our asks for Hill Day. It's something that certainly may come up, and obviously it's something that's very important, so we wanted to talk about it. But don't feel like this is stuff that you have to memorize before tomorrow. And if there's things that I don't cover because I'm only really doing a snapshot of it, I'm happy to talk at another time or in the question period. But so as I said, there's a number of patient protections that were included in the ACA that are incredibly important, particularly for cancer patients. So one that I am sure that you have heard about is the prohibition against discriminating against people with pre-existing health conditions. So before the ACA, a health insurer could charge more or deny you coverage if you had a pre-existing health condition such as and now today, with the ACA in place, they cannot charge you more, they cannot deny you coverage, they can't limit benefits based on whether you come in with a cancer diagnosis or another condition, and they can't refuse to cover that treatment for your condition. So obviously, this is incredibly important and something that would be necessary in any future legislation that we might see in terms of healthcare. And related to pre-existing conditions is what we call guaranteed renewability. So before the ACA, a health insurer could refuse to renew your plan if you developed a health condition. So today, that's no longer the case, and a health insurer is required to offer to renew your policy as long as you continue to pay premiums. So it sort of kind of brings the pre-existing condition protection full circle, so that you're not going to lose coverage after having it for a year, but as long as you continue to pay your premiums, you will continue to be covered. Another important protection is the caps on annual and lifetime limits. So again, before the ACA, plans could set dollar limits on what they would spend for your benefits, for your treatment, either for the year or over the lifetime of your plan. So that means that, you know, in a given year, if you ran up a really expensive bill, and let's say their annual limit was $100,000, whatever treatment or care that you received that went above that $100,000 limit, that would be on you. And same for lifetime. So if their lifetime limit was $1 million and you surpass that in the first 2 years, again, you would have to shoulder that cost. So today, annual and lifetime limits on most benefits are prohibited. So you can receive the care that you need, and regardless of what the price is and regardless of how long you need that care. I'm really struggling with the clicker here. And so finally, the other really important piece of the Affordable Care Act is the emphasis on screening and prevention. So another sort of ACA buzzword that you probably have heard a lot, or phrase I should say, is essential health benefits. So all ACA plans are required to include a list of about 10 essential health benefits. And those include screening, so particularly colorectal cancer screening. So prior to the ACA, there was a lot of variability between plans. So some plans might have covered screening, some might not. Some might have covered a hospital stay, some might have not. So this really sort of streamlines and standardized plans to make sure that wherever you're getting your plan, you know that it's going to cover the screening that you need. So we faced a number of repeal and replace attempts over the past year. I'm not going to go too deep into what these all entailed, but I wanted to just briefly talk about them because it was a really, really incredible showing of our advocates. We had, you can see all of the different iterations here, and that's not even the full list of various ways that changes and repeals were attempted for this law. But we mobilized, we made our voices heard, and these proposals did not go forward, which is a really, really incredible victory, and I think that you all should give yourself a pat on the back or a round of applause or however you want to congratulate yourself, because this year, opened up with folks assuming that this was going to be the first thing on the agenda. They were going to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, and that was going to be sort of their first big legislative accomplishment. And we were able to push back. So we kind of got over a major hump with that, I would say. It doesn't mean that the fight is over, and it doesn't mean that we're completely in the clear. We continue to monitor. The administration has, taken some steps to make changes to the law through their channels without going through Congress. So those are things that we continue to monitor, and we will continue to keep you updated, both what you need to know and things that you can do. This is another place that we have worked really closely with our partners in the advocacy community. So what was really incredible during this whole experience was being able to see not only different advocates from different cancer groups, but from different disease groups, from all across the spectrum, really come together and have this united voice. Because, while there's a lot of things that different disease groups agree on, we're also, each fighting for our own sort of proprietary needs and our own individual policy asks or research funding that's important to us. So to have an experience where we could all come together and sort of stand shoulder to shoulder and push back against this, I think was really, really important. And there's power in numbers, so. So I think Chelsey and I are happy to take questions. And again, I know this was a very sort of quick glaze over a very big and sort of complicated subject, but yeah.
We can take questions on this or what we talked about yesterday or whatever is useful to you. Do you want to call?
I'm just standing up because my back hurts, not
No
because I'm
problem.
trying to be super powerful. I'm curious, when we're looking at our list of representatives, and I'll just use my example. I was at Cory Gardner's office in Denver about 6 times during the health care bill, so this, it looks like his LA is going to recognize me. I know her. Would you say, in general, should we try to strategize and pick a topic that might be more aligned? Because I know, for example, that Cory Gardner doesn't believe in the ACA, wants to repeal it, and voted for the health care bill. In that case, would you not pick that as your angle that you would go? You know what I mean? Do you kind of tailor what you're going to focus on based on what you assume is the affiliation, or what if you are lucky enough to know about your representative? Or
Most
do you
of them
just
are
go
not
with
shy
what you're
about telling
passionate
you.
about?
Yeah. I think that's a great question, and I think that part of, we're not going to agree with every member on every subject, but finding the areas where we can work together is what's most important. And so that doesn't mean that we're going to hold back and not tell them the way that we feel about their stance on ACA or if it's another issue. But I think for tomorrow, if there are areas where you think that there are agreement, and I would imagine particularly on NIH funding, that would be something that Senator Gardner would support. And so, it's something proactive that he can do, and it's a way that we can work together. So I think sort of trying to focus on areas where we can find agreement makes the most sense. And then, if they do things that we disagree with, we can respectfully let them know.
I would just also add that there is not a pending action on ACA right now. And so if we were coming into a situation where there was a vote coming or something like that, that would be a different situation. Really what makes a successful Hill visit is when you can say, and this specifically is what you can do for me. So certainly, I don't think it's going to be any secret to any member of Congress that disease advocacy groups don't like their position if they want to repeal the ACA. But the good news is, like Molly said, there's plenty that we can agree on, and the pending issues they're not partisan, they're not controversial. But it does represent something they can do.
Any other questions?
Good morning. I just wanted to point out that for the past 2 years, I have been a peer reviewer for the DoD contracts, proposals, and there are some really amazing proposals. So I'm a research advocate, and so I see a lot of clinical trial applications, proposals, and these are really basic science, but they're looking at things from an entirely different point of view, many of them. So one of these could be the breakthrough that cures colorectal cancer. So it's really, really important that we do this. It's not just some abstract thing somewhere. There are several of us who have been peer reviewers, and some of them are very amazing. And in each one of these review groups, we sit down for 2 days in a room full of scientists and advocates and rate and evaluate every one of the proposals, and then make group recommendations, which goes into a higher group, which I think Nancy Roach is on the higher group that then makes decisions on funding. But this is really worth supporting.
And I would just say part of what we're doing here, there are a lot of members of Congress who literally just don't know that this program exists. It's not a matter of they don't support it. It's not a matter of, it's just not on their radar. And so part of what we're doing is making sure that they know this exists, it has a real impact, and this is why it's important. 9 times out of 10, it's educating a member on something that they might just not be right in front of them. rather than trying to convince them to change their position.
And I would also just add, in this room, we have so many great resources. So Lee and his other fellow research advocates to be able to talk about, what it really means to be a part of this program, what it means to get one of these grants, what it means to review one of these grants. And a gentleman earlier talked about what it was like to break down a lab and have to, close shop. And so I think sort of taking the experience of the researchers that we have in this room and sharing, that side of the story as well is also a really kind of good way to approach this topic.
I just wanted to point out that the colorectal cancer control program, based on my understanding from past years, the reason why it's 70 million is the most we're asking for is I believe that covers all 50 states, and that's why we're capping it at that, I think.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
I'm Ann Sommer, and y'all know that I'm a cancer researcher. And one of the papers that we've just done is value of waiving co-insurance for colon cancer screening in Medicare beneficiaries. And we're going to say that if you could just even get 0.5% more people screened, then doing colonoscopy screening and paying for this copay would essentially be cost effective. So is this the kind of information you take to Congress? And they will digest it. This is published in December 2017 Health Affairs.
Definitely. Offices love data, studies, anything that they can refer to sort of ground the ask in something a little bit more concrete than sort of an anecdote. So I think any data, any studies that we have to back up our asks are definitely incredibly valuable. And Caroline Powers with ACS CAN, I don't know if she's here yet, but she's going to chat a little bit further about the loophole bill. But I think we are definitely trying to have that conversation about value and what it would mean to close the loophole, which has sort of a nominal cost associated with it compared to the cost of treatment.
One of the challenges that we face on the Hill, and this is changing a little bit, but they have a specific way that they determine how much something costs the federal government. And so some of the data that we have doesn't fit that exact mold. We're accounting for lost days of work, and we're accounting for things like how it affects your family and things like that. And so the thought process is changing, but there are strictures on how they can look at cost savings. So what you're talking about and having that data and not just, okay, it makes common sense, really helps us make that argument that, hey, on paper it may look like you're spending $50 million more on screening, but downstream you're saving $100 million or whatever it is on treatment. So that kind of data is really helpful.
Quality of life as well.
Absolutely, and productivity, and all of those things. And the effect on keeping families intact. There's a lot of data and a lot of factors that again just don't go into the cost score. But that's something that we have to put out there. It's not just about the dollars and cents. It's about the savings, both of lives, but of treatment in the future. Thank you.
So we have leave behind packets for you that will be distributed later this afternoon, I believe. So you'll have a packet that has all of this information. It does not include the study, but that's something that we can also follow up with all the offices via email.
This is the beginning of a conversation. So when things like that come to our attention and they help make the case, it's a great opportunity for us to follow up or for you all to follow up, and we can prompt you to do that.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So for the new people here and some of you who have been with your advocate leaders before, and this time you're going to be on your own, just remember that these offices are not the same. You've got people who are supportive, and then you've got those who play by the budget rules, and they're going to use words like pay-go, and they're going to ask you, well, you're asking for an increase. Where should we cut? Well, it's not your job to tell them where to cut, okay? But the one thing you really want to make sure that you tell them, if you can't vote to increase it, don't cut it. You know, at least keep us where we're at. You know, don't walk out of that. They may ask you, we've got 3 or 4 lists that we're going to be, you know, in our ask. They may ask you, hey, if you had to pick one, what's the most important? Be prepared. If you know Corey Gardner, for example, is in favor, likes NIH, go with that. You know, play the game. Use your story to set that table. And when they tell you, and that we've used this in our local state legislature, when you're trying to get money to increase for screening or whatever, and they say, well, you know, where's the math? All you really have to know is what it costs you. You know, if you're a stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, what does it cost you to get treated? And then what does end-of-life care cost? And they can do the math. You know, it's not up to you to tell them how much. But just play the game with them. But just be smart on how you do it. Don't, you know, and if you need any tips, there's a lot of us around here who will help you before you go up on the Hill.
And there will be staff who say that exact. There are offices. I mean, I could list them for you. I won't. But there are offices who will say, okay, so you want a $20 million increase. So where do you propose that we cut that? That isn't why we're here. We're not here to make value judgments on everything that they're considering. We're here to make the case for the value of what we know. And some staff will just stick to that, and that's the best you can do, and that's okay. But it's the beginning of a conversation. It's something we follow up on, and eventually maybe a different staffer comes with a different perspective. Maybe there's an ask that we can bring them that they can support. So even if you go to an office and they say no, no, no on everything, it's still extremely valuable to do it. Even if you walk out of there feeling like, I don't think they're going to support any of this. That's okay, because this is a process over time, and some of them take a little bit longer to bring over, but we always will find something that they can support. Thank you.
Just when you're talking to a staffer, staffers have a lot of influence, but they're not going to be able to tell you yes definitively on anything, or this has been my experience
Not
anyway.
usually.
You know, they're not going to say, oh yes, my boss will co-sign this, but you can kind of get a sense of whether they like the idea or not, and staffers really do have a lot of influence. So if you're talking to a staffer, that's actually a good thing. So
I think that we found sometimes, well, we're going to be biased because we were staffers, but sometimes
the staffers are the smartest.
Yeah, they're the smartest, they're the prettiest.
They're amazing.
Often you can have a better, more substantive conversation with a staffer because a member has to, you know, be sort of a mile wide and an inch deep. You know, they're interested or looking at everything from foreign affairs to taxes to, you know, agriculture policy. But the staff is more specialized, so they go deeper into the issues, you know, in the healthcare space, into these funding issues. So you can kind of talk in a little bit more depth
and the members, right? And the member relies on their counsel, right? So for those of you who haven't been to the Hill before, the country is run by 25-year-olds, so prepare. But they're smart, they're quick learners, and their bosses look to them for counsel because the member of Congress can only be in one place at one time, and so they rely on their staff to be in all of those other places and to make recommendations to them. Thank you for that.
So with that, we're going to wrap up this part of the deep dives. Thank you so much to Chelsey and Molly for giving us all of that wonderful information. If we could now pull up Caroline Powers. Caroline, as you all may know, we have a really great relationship with the